Welcome back to Next Gen Investing. It's now time for FOMO. And today we are talking Palantir, as this name is pulling back pretty substantially from its highs, now down about 8% for the session. So joining us now to talk more about Palantir is Kevin Green, Senior Markets Correspondent for the network. So Kevin, walk us through the latest, because I do know that Barron's was one arguing last week it was time to sell, and then we've seen shares, pull back about 20, almost 30% since then. So perhaps that was a good call, but obviously it's all relative. I'm curious your thoughts here on Palantir.
The trajectory when you're looking at price as well as volume is obviously to the downside right now. And unfortunately, from a technical standpoint, it's testing a gap. And usually we do not see turnarounds in the middle of a gap. Anything is possible here, but you're kind of looking at the next area of support for the stock, kind of sitting at around $84, basically $85 here. And maybe you do have some buyers kind of stepping in. Now, obviously, we've seen a little bit of an aggressive sell-off. Initially, this was really around the news that came out of Washington around potentially cutting spending within the Pentagon over the next 4 to 5 years, and that could have actually an impact when it comes to not only just contractors, but also maybe some of the contracts that Palantir currently has with the federal government, and then future revenues when it comes to government contracts as well. Now, what's actually very interesting is that the head of the DoD basically came back and said, look, that's not the full report. We're just kind of basically readjusting some spending in certain areas, but kind of pulled back on the initial reports here. But nevertheless, the stock kind of still sold off. And then we also have Alex Karp, the CEO, planning to sell around $1.2 billion worth of shares in the market here, also kind of shaking up the investor confidence. So I believe you're probably just seeing a little bit of an unwind, some profit taking place here. And then we'll have to just wait until we get commentary from the CEO or from the company if they are seeing any type of cancellation in contracts. Now, the CEO is actually going to be speaking today, so we might get some comments today, Jenny. But one thing to just kind of note, usually if you start seeing a significant amount of contracts being cut immediately, that could have a material impact on their earnings, especially for their current quarter. Usually the company will come out and actually announce that because it's a material adjustment to any type of forward guidance. Not saying that they have to, but that's just something to keep on the radar. If you are seeing those type of trends, maybe we do get some commentary from the company before the next earnings announcement, which is going to be another couple of months from now.
KG, how do you make sense of this one from a technical standpoint? I look at a stock that's 25% off its highs, yet it's like over 10% away from where it gapped up still. Obviously, that highlights the volatility that this name can garner, but I think that there's nothing that's really changed, right? Like, it's still the same bullish construction, right?
Yeah, it's still bullish. It stops being bullish really if you kind of break below $63, which is still a long way from here, right? Around $30. But you basically want to come back and really try to retest that $80 to $85 level, see if some buyers actually step in. Now, what makes this very difficult, once again, is you usually don't stop and see a turnaround within the middle of a gap. Sometimes you do, most of the times you do not. But the candle structure for today, if we kind of end where we are at right now, the bears definitely have it on their side with the stock being down about 8%. But if you look at it on an intraday basis, some buyers are actually stepping in. What you want to see from a technical standpoint is red candle days, but lower volume each and every consecutive day after that. And that really gives you the sense that maybe sellers are exhausted right now and maybe a turnaround is actually taking place. We're not seeing that quite yet, but the candle setup for today's session actually does look kind of interesting, that maybe some people are trying to maybe take a shot here.
Okay, so Kevin, what do you say to those that argue this name had become way overvalued? And right now, that's the nature of some of this pressure we're seeing, is that this is what happens when you have so many of the biggest names in tech in the market now priced at, valuations that are astronomical.
Yeah, it was very overpriced when you're looking at the traditional metrics. What I will say, though, is the growth rate when it comes to EPS growth, as well as revenue growth, but EPS growth really kind of shows you that profitability side of the equation and their ability to bring in new customers, very large customers at a very healthy clip. At some point, last quarter, I believe, is like, 20% quarter-over-quarter increase in customer growth there. Those are really, decent growth metrics. So you can understand that maybe a premium was assigned to this company here. And we're just kind of seeing a pullback. I just get a little bit cautious, though, Jenny, right? Because we've seen companies that have been traditionally overvalued and continue to run up. and then they grow into their valuations. Nvidia is one, Tesla is another one, right? Apple at one point was the same. So sometimes you kind of play these trends until they actually break, because if you go off valuations alone, sometimes that gets you out of potentially bullish trades, especially when you're looking at the broader market as a whole. So a pullback may be warranted right now. You need a narrative. You have some sellers kind of coming in, but I wouldn't count the stock out by any means by any means right now.
Do you look to the broader market then for clues if what you're describing is happening? I mean, you see Meta after that historic run making a pretty steep pullback. You see things like MicroStrategy and Bitcoin turning around after its big run. It does seem like some of the areas that had been huge successes for investors and traders is the areas of weakness that we've seen in the recent sessions.
Yeah, for sure. And we see those type of cycles, right? We kind of see these narratives when it comes to stocks. Everybody's bidding them up, and we continue to see them rise to the upside. You see very stretched valuations. And once again, it's very hard to come to terms with some of those stretched valuations as the stocks continue to move up. But now we're seeing a little bit of a pullback. And you're right. I mean, Meta seeing that pullback too. But on the other side of that, 19 consecutive trading sessions up is kind of an anomaly for any stock, especially one of that size. So a pullback is probably warranted. And actually, HIMS is another stock that has been catching that same type of bid, and now you're seeing a little bit of a pullback. I think right now this is kind of a reset. I would not look at the broader market as a risk on, risk off gauge when it comes to Palantir or some of these AI names, because they have secular trends. What you want to be looking for is the narratives, the news items that actually hit the wire that could be beneficial and or detrimental to their business. And right now they just had a bad week when it came to news flow. You had an unwinding when it came to long equity holders, as well as an unwinding when it came to options holders in this name. It'll find an area of support. It'll regroup itself and maybe move forward here. But once again, it's a secular trend that I find it very hard to believe that the U.S. government's not going to continue to try to improve their technology if they're looking for efficiencies. That's usually the easiest way to do so. And I would be very, very shocked if that's something that really materially impacts Palantir over the long term.
Yeah, and I can think of no better entity that needs to improve their efficiencies other than the U.S. government. So I think a great point and great way to leave it. Appreciate that as always, and the insight into Palantir and some of the U.S. government spending trends. Kevin Green, of course, senior correspondent here for the network.